Serious. What's your true, supernatural, or unexplainable, downright creepy story? Story 1. Until a few years ago, I still had an older slider phone. One day I got a random call asking for some girl named Sarah. I told them they had the wrong number and they immediately hung up. For the next few months, I would get these calls asking for Sarah about once or twice a week, coming from different numbers and different sounding people. Sometimes these calls came at 3 in the morning. Well, one day I got a call, and like usual, I said I didn't know Sarah. And after they hung up, I went to my contacts and hit redial. After I did, the machine took over and said that number did not exist. I went back through my call history, trying to call some other people who had called me with the same result, a machine telling me the number did not exist. Every time I would get these calls, I would redial the number and still get the machine. I googled the numbers, but all I learned is they were coming from North Dakota and Montana, basically everywhere in the Midwest, which isn't all that weird because I live there. I started wondering what's going on, so the next time I got a call asking for Sarah, I said, "Oh yeah, she's right here." And the other person at the other end said, "No, she isn't." And I hung up. And things started getting weird when I started getting calls from unknown numbers calling me. Whoever or whatever was on the other end was hanging up the second I said hello. The creepiest one I ever got was from a call I got where they didn't hang up after I said hello. I could hear someone on the other end just listening, but they didn't say anything. Just something really uneasy about it. Eventually I switched phones and got a smartphone, and I immediately stopped getting calls. I haven't gotten a single random call in about 3 years now, despite the fact that I still have my old number from the old phone. No, she isn't. That's unsettling. Story 2. I had a black cat called Casper. We adopted her after she ran away from the previous owner. She was missing for days before the previous owner found her in the bushes, skittish and frightened. After carrying her home, the owner discovered she was allergic to cats when her arm broke out with rashes. She called for a new home and was answered by my animal-loving family. For ages, she was scared to come near anyone. She's totally averse to being petted. Eventually, she turned into a total sook, never missing the chance to jump on you and lie with you. We loved her, and I loved her heaps. You could feel genuine affection for that one. Then one day, she lost the use of her back legs. Not long after, she passed away. I was having a rough time then, and she was a big comforter. The point is, me and my parents were sad. A few days later, I'm sitting on my front step having a smoke, and I hear a meowing sounding identical to Casper. I looked out front, and there at the gate was a cat meowing at me that looked just like Casper. I went over and it ran away. I looked down the street after it and it was gone. I mentioned it to my parents. They both said the same thing happened to each of them separately, which was a surprise to them too. It could have been a coincidentally similar cat from the neighborhood, but it only happened each to one of us and was never seen again. There is plenty of room for more rational explanations, but I choose to think that Casper said thanks before snuggling on that big belly in the sky. Story 3. Back in 2005, I was in a band that toured the country in a 15-passenger van with a trailer. We were on the way from Columbus, Ohio to Erie, Pennsylvania. The show had been canceled in Ohio due to a power outage, so we decided to get on the road early as we had friends in Erie, Pennsylvania who were taking us in for the night. While on I-80, about 25 minutes outside of Erie, I'll never forget this moment for the rest of my life. We were all pretty much alert and actively having a conversation. There were 8 of us total in the van when the driver and passenger both shouted simultaneously, "What was that?" I'm getting goosebumps on my arms right now just remembering the event. I was sitting behind the driver with my back against the window and I didn't see anything, but we heard a whooshing sound as if something flew right over the van. My friend, who was sitting next to me, looked like he had just seen a ghost. We wound up pulling over on the side of the road because everyone was freaking out, thinking we hit something. Nothing was found. Both the passengers and driver said they saw a tall black figure lunge at the van from the shoulder of the left lane. My friend, who was sitting next to me, said the same thing. No, I didn't think they were all playing a hoax on the unknowing members, because I know these guys and they were very scared. We arrived at our destination and the house we were staying at's power was also out. The next day, we inspected the van in daylight and noticed there were streak marks across the roof of the van. Our van was white and also very dirty due to touring the entire country. Still, to this day, we don't know what we witnessed. We've done some research on it and similar reports have happened in and around the same area. If the scratches in the van spooked you, you should check out the spooky prints left by the invader in Story 7. Story 4. I was home alone and in the bath, but I had closed the door so that my dogs wouldn't run in and try to jump into the bath too. They always do. So I was in there for a good 45 to 50 minutes, and when I climbed out and opened the door, there had been a table moved right in front of the door. I never heard a thing while it was happening. I never even heard my dogs bark, and they bark for anything, and they were playing outside, which is so strange for them. I've had so many weird things happen to me in the house I'm currently living in. This was just one of many. Another one is that there was a stage of about 3 or 4 weeks where my dogs would refuse to sleep in my house. They would rather sleep outside. Within those weeks, I would constantly feel like I was being watched, hearing people coughing and sneezing outside my window. One morning, I woke up with a scratch on my face. My dogs were all outside as they refused to sleep in the house with me. I woke up in the middle of the night once. I was partly sleepy and partly awake. I needed the bathroom, but I couldn't get through the door. Something kept blocking me and pushing me back. I was physically pushed back to my bed, and I just remembered climbing back into bed and waking up the next morning like, thank God it was just a dream. I got up and realized I was on the wrong side of the bed, and I was filled with scratch marks on my arms and legs. It scared the hell out of me. This is a story from my other house. I could honestly spend hours upon hours telling stories of all the crazy things I've seen in all those houses I've lived in. Now, this specific house is the house I grew up in, and the first time I ever saw something. I was quite young. I had a playroom that was in the bottom part of the house. The house was set up in such a way that it was just one long passage with 6 bedrooms. And my toy room was the last bedroom right at the end. Now, we never went to the bottom part of the house. I always thought it was because we never needed to. It's only later that I found out the real reason why. But anyway, to get back to the story, one specific day I had something I didn't recognize come into my bedroom and just told me to start running. I was so scared that I immediately ran to my mom. She told me it was nothing and that it was probably my shadow and the TV in the background. Only when I was older did she admit she'd actually seen it herself. I described exactly what I saw and never spoke of it again. Fast forward to a few years later, and my little cousin comes running out of the same room, screaming to her mom that a shadow told her to start running. Another incident. I would usually lie in the entertainment area and watch TV. I did it only during the daytime though. Nobody dared to go that way at night. This specific day I was lying down on the couch and my back was towards the rest of the passage. I was home alone at the time and we had tiles, so I heard footsteps walking towards me and naturally assumed it was my dad, so I didn't think anything of it. After a few seconds I turned around and there's nobody there. Story 5. When I was younger I stayed up way too late in the computer. It was about 1 or 2 in the morning and everyone else was asleep. I got thirsty and wandered down the hallway to get a drink. I didn't bother to turn on any lights since there was a nightlight in the hallway and there was enough light to get by. I'm walking back to the bedroom when I get this weird feeling like someone is watching me. And I turn around. There's this big white mist just floating right behind me. I immediately turned around and knelt my way back into the bright, safe room. The thing is, there were no windows facing that hallway and I hadn't passed the nightlight yet, so it definitely wasn't a trick of the light. All the doors leading to the hallway were also closed. A few years later, when I was moved to the small room closet to that spot, I got the heebie-jeebies and couldn't sleep without a lamp on. It wasn't until sometime later after the sighting that I learned that in the 80s, a guy was renting out the house. He was arrested for the abduction, violation, and disappearance of a bunch of kids in the area and for the suspected slaying of his wife. They never found her, and she supposedly ran away, according to him. Cadaver dogs went over the farm, but they never found anything. The cops must have not done a good job, though, because when they moved in, my mom found a pair of boys' underwear in the toilet tank. The missing wife was never found, and he passed away in prison about a decade ago. I think she's still there, though. Story 6. My grandma's house is a very stereotypical horror movie house, a small Midwest town, a white and old-looking home and a farm. She even has a chipped wooden Mother Mary statue in the front yard. You get the picture. The worst part is that she has a cemetery about a half-mile down the road. Anyway, I used to sleep in the room in the corner on the top floor, my aunt's room, and it had a wooden rocking chair in it. When I was younger, I would wake up because I thought I heard it rocking, to the point where I would wake up my grandma and have to stay in her room. Well, about 10 years later, my mom, aunt, and I were talking about how creepy grandma's house was. My aunt goes on to talk about how, when she was younger, the reason my mom and she ended up sharing a room was because she thought her room was haunted. She said she woke up one morning and the rocking chair was about 2 feet closer to the bed, and after that night it would start rocking on a nightly basis at midnight. It freaked me out. Story 7. We just moved to the UK from Texas the year before. We moved into a really nice farmhouse in the south of England near Wilton. We were completely alone for at least 3 miles in each direction. Anyway, on with the creepiness. The first thing that happened was in our kitchen. It was a large room with light fixtures in the ceiling. Those lights were flickering one night and I was just staring at them. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see a girl. She was wearing a white dress with her hand in the window. It scared the hell out of me, so I jumped back and tried to put my focus on her. But when I tried, she was gone. And in that instant, the glass of the light fixture fell. The second thing was slightly more terrifying. I was home alone, it was raining that night, my mom was out somewhere, with friends I think. I was just watching TV. It was about 9 p.m. and I could hear scratching. Not like a dog scratching the door to go out, but like a long continuous scratch. So I looked around the house and I saw nothing. I sat back down to watch TV and I heard it again, but it sounded like it was outside, so I darted out the back door to have a look. Maybe a tree in the bad weather, but I saw nothing again. I came back inside and the TV was off and the front door was unlocked. I ran to get a kitchen knife and my mom's old phone. I hid in the office that is on the ground floor, texted my mom and told her what was going on. She calls the cops and they arrive. They have a look around and see wet boot prints that walk in through the front door, lead into the kitchen and then stop. No exit prints. Story 8. I don't believe in ghosts. About 10 years ago, my boyfriend and I were in bed sleeping. He jerked awake and started inching up towards the headboard, which woke me up. He was making scared moans and was looking at the foot of our bed. I looked at where he was looking and saw a short man with frizzy hair and a big snout and jowls staring at him. Not me, but him. He started screaming to turn on the light and I was reaching over to do that when it lunged at him and made a weird grunting noise. I turned on the light and when I did, it disappeared. We started talking about what we saw and I would say he had frizzy hair and he said yes, and a big snout and jowls. Our descriptions matched perfectly. I felt this wave of absolute malevolence rolling off this creature and towards my boyfriend. Not at me, but at him. We tried to recreate it with lights and shadows, but couldn't. We stepped in the living room that night. We didn't leave the house. Still don't believe in ghosts, but I don't know how else to think about this thing. Still get goosebumps thinking or talking or writing about this. I haven't told my current boyfriend because I don't want to scare him. I'm still in the building. I haven't felt that evil feeling since the ex-boyfriend moved out. Those are the kinds of supernatural stuff that spooks me out. Those that have the intention to hurt. If you want to watch more bone-chilling stories, like this video and subscribe to my channel. Story 9. I have two that scared the hell out of me, both in the past couple of months. One of them, as my post-history might reveal, was like the old hag vision, but behind me as I slept at my side facing the wall. I was almost asleep and I knew I was awake because I just got up to use the bathroom 5 minutes before. Suddenly, but still, with a fade out, all the ambient noise stopped in the house and neighborhood and the silence was pounding. I then got the feeling that something bad was going to happen. I don't know if it was my imagination or actually happened, but I felt like hearing a whooshing sound that got deafeningly loud. As my heart rate spiked to around 200 BPM, it felt like, and I knew, not thought or felt, that there was something malicious behind me. About 4 seconds later, it was over. Also, I went to bed one night after watching a bunch of spooky paranormal videos and was thoroughly on edge. I was ridiculously paranoid about ghosts, even though I had never had anything ghostly in the house at all, nor had anything bad happen in it that I knew of. Then at around 3 a.m., still not asleep because of fear, the band on my boxer briefs snapped as if someone pulled on them, and then let go. I was convinced that I was being messed with. Story 10. I saw my grandmother's ghost. I was very young. We lived in upstate New York, just outside of New York City. Grandma Catherine lived in Chester County, Pennsylvania. I have zero memory of her aside from this. One night I woke up at about 4 in the morning, walked into my parents' bedroom and sat in the leather wing chair my father sat in when he read. Across the room was my father's closet. The door opened and Grandma Catherine walked about 6 feet in front of me, smiled, sort of bent from the waist and said, "I just wanted to say goodbye." Then she turned and went back into the closet, closing the door behind her. I went back to bed and about 2 hours later the phone rang. About 10 minutes after that, my mother came into my bedroom to tell me that Grandma Catherine had died. I said, "I know." My mother asked, "What?" I told my story. She made me retell it 2 or 3 times, then gripped me by my shoulders hard and made me promise and swear to my eternal soul that I'd never ever tell my father that story. It freaked the kid out of me, so I agreed. I never told him the story either. I lived another 15 years and never heard the story. Story 11. When I was young, I was riding horses with my friend in the field beside her house. The horse threw me and I hit my head hard. The next thing I know, I'm on my back in incredible pain, staring up at my friend, who was frantically screaming at me. Dazed, my gaze shifted, and then I refocused on her friend behind her. A tall, thin man wearing a black suit and an old-fashioned wide-brimmed hat was staring unblinkingly into my eyes over my friend's shoulder. Days later, she came to visit me in the hospital and asked her about the man I'd seen. I thought it was the new boyfriend she'd recently told me about. She told me there was no one there but me and her. Story 12. This happened a long time ago. We lived in a really small apartment that had 2 rooms. When you enter our room, you can just see the kitchen and there's a doorway on the left, which is our bedroom. I was playing in the bedroom and got my slipper stuck under the bed. I can't seem to get it since there's only a 2-inch gap under the bed. I don't know what got into me, but I started chanting something like, "Slipper, get out now!" over and over again. Then I got this feeling of dread and I got scared, so I got to our front door, where my mom was. Then I started chanting again. After a few minutes, I sneaked to the bedroom and found my slipper a foot away from the bed. I ran inside to get it and I got out as fast as I could. I was speculating about how it happened. As a little girl with an overactive imagination, I just assumed a rat passed by me, heard me and just pushed my slipper out of there. I heard supernatural stuff happen more to kids. Story 13. I was staying at the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas, the oldest property in the strip with a sordid mob history. In the middle of the night, I woke up and saw a dark figure moving around the foot of my bed and coming up the gap between the twin beds. I hit the light and there was a full figure of a man in a 50s to 60s sports blazer with his face messed up. I yelled, "Go away!" and started flinging my arm in his direction. Just like that, he disappeared. I woke my friends in the other bed and my buddy said, "What the hell are you swatting at?" I told them and they laughed at me. The following morning, my buddy said after I had fallen asleep that water was dripping on his head, but there was no leak in the ceiling. We were convinced we may have shared a paranormal encounter. Story 14. When I was young, I suddenly awoke in the middle of the night to a young child kneeling near my bed, praying. At first, I thought it was my younger brother, so I asked him what he was doing. After I asked, he slowly looked at me, stood up and started running, so I hopped out of bed and followed him down my stairs and out my front door. We had a long driveway and I followed him all the way to the end, and then he simply vanished. I went back to my room and nothing like that has happened since. Story 15. This past year, I went to bed in a normal night and in mid-dream, everything stopped and a voice said, "The fire alarm is about to go off." I woke up about 5 minutes later when the fire alarm started in our building. I asked my roommates the next day if anyone said that, and I just happened to hear it, but they said the alarm went off around 4 a.m. They were all sleeping prior to it going off, plus none of us knew they were testing the alarm beforehand. Felt strange and a little weirded out after. Story 16. This is my partner's story. When he was young, he would talk to a man he saw in the mirror. Naturally, his parents were curious about his behavior and asked him questions about the man. He told his parents details about the man, including his appearance, hobbies, and how he passed away. It turns out that one of the former owners of the house was a man who had ended himself in the house, and he matched the descriptions of the man my partner saw in the mirror. When his parents found out, they moved out of the house a month later. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy. What's the most paranormal thing you've seen? Story 4 will give you major goosebumps. See you on that video.